In this recording from the 2025 SketchUp 3D Summit, Nick Sonder walks us through his design process on a beautiful mountain modern project. You'll see how he builds a site model, develops the early massing, and carries the design all the way into a complete set of construction documents. This video is sponsored by Knack Design Build. If you can sketch it, model it, or dream it, they can build it. From custom furniture pieces to full-scale fabrication, Knack brings your ideas to life with precision and care. More about Knack in a moment. Now, if you want a clear look at how an experienced architect approaches a mountain modern home from start to finish, you're in the right place. Let's get into it.
Well, welcome everybody. Pretty exciting to be back in Denver. Anytime, feel free to ask questions. This is going to be a pretty loose presentation of a home that I designed about a year and a half ago, and it's been under construction now for 2 years. It's supposed to wrap up in about 3 or 4 months. Our construction timeline in the Tahoe area is pretty extended because our weather changes drastically in the fall. We're also restricted on when we can do earthwork and things like that, so it really extends that timeline. But I'll try to go, through each of the phases based on that description that I just read before the presentation. Just kidding. And it'll take you through schematic design, then through design development, and I'll show some of the construction documents and wrap up by showing some of the progress pictures of the actual project under construction. The first thing that I do is, as an architect, and we all do, is we collect information on the project. We generally refer to that as the pre-design phase. And that includes things like getting site surveys done, collecting information from the clients so that we know the full scope of work that we're going to be dealing with. And that can include things like just a space compendium of, this is the amount of area I want in the living room. I want an open plan. I want a certain style of architecture. And in my area, the styles that are extremely popular and have been for several years now is the mountain modern style, which kind of in some ways combines some of the tenets we strive for in mountain home design, dealing with our extreme climate of snow. As an example, we had an average year this year that totaled close to 400 inches of snow. In 23, we had, I believe it was 800 inches. In 2011, we had over 1,000 inches of snow. Sometimes that's not fun to live through. Sometimes it's really beautiful, makes for great skiing. All of that, but it does have its implications on home design that you don't necessarily deal with in any other regions that don't deal with heavy snow, because it's also not just light, dry snow like you get in Colorado. Like I designed a house in Crested Butte, and I was amazed that their snow load was only 90 pounds per square foot, where we have snow loads that go up to 500, 600 pounds per square foot. And put that in perspective, that's like planting Humvees on end on your roof. So it creates some very deep structure all the way down through to the foundation. But we've only got an hour, so I'm going to try and go through some of this quickly. This model that you're seeing here, this is actually the first step I take. And a lot of times I will do this before I even go out to see the site. And what I do is I have the client hire a licensed land surveyor, and then they provide me the PDF of the site, and then they also provide me the AutoCAD file, which I then load the AutoCAD file directly into SketchUp to create the model of the 3D site. You'll notice when they bring it in, the contours are set at actual elevation, so a lot of times I'll have the information and then it's 6,500 feet up are the contours, and so I have to kind of adjust that down so the model doesn't move too far away from the origin, and will reduces clipping if you do that. And so when I bring that in, anything that comes in at 0, 0 is all the line work. Like below you see this dashed work, that's all the meets and bounds, setbacks, easements, tree locations, utilities, all of those things that we have to account for in our design. Then I use all native tools in my entire process. The only plugin I'm using these days is Profile Builder, and I use one for a rendering program. And I use, for instance, sandbox tools to create the 3D mesh of the entire site. The contours are there, they're just hidden underneath by click those on, you can see them. This site, for our area, is relatively flat, which is somewhat rare. There's usually a price premium associated with that. They're also directly on the golf course. But it allows for ease of access, level driveways, parking. Those are all things in snow country we have to be really careful of. In this case, they had a really good position for view and solar exposure, so we're able to keep a lot of sun on the driveway and the garage doors so they don't bind up in the winter. So the very first steps that I take after I've done this, the benefit of doing the 3D model before I go on the site, it actually gets me very familiar with the site and the topography that I'm going to deal with in the design process. All the trees are located exactly where all of the trees are from the survey. So it's, of course, only as accurate as the survey is, which any of you that work with surveyors, their accuracy is plus or minus a contour, which I always say, thanks for that. And then all of the HOAs have dead strict site or height requirements based on the survey. So we just never know if it's quite 6 inches over, but we can only do what we can do. And so from here, when I start going into design, I used to do a lot of hand sketching. I was actually trained as a hand drafting architect. I graduated Rhode Island School of Design in 1988. My first job was working at a drafting table with Mylar and plastic leads. If anyone's ever done that, it's the most miserable feeling combination you could possibly have. And then slowly started to transition. The firms in the 90s transitioned to a lot of AutoCAD. And then I used AutoCAD pretty much till about 2007. From 2000 to 2007, I had started using SketchUp, and I was using a combination of the two, which a lot of folks do. And then 2007, I completely transitioned to using only SketchUp and LayOut. No longer have AutoCAD even on a computer anymore. But my design process, what I'll do is I always look at, there's very unique things for how we design in snow country. A large one is, as I mentioned, access to the site, positioning of the home for solar exposure, as well as how it will deal with snow migrating through the season. When I say migrating, sliding off the roof, things like that. So you have to be very cautious of what happens with all of that snow as it melts or if it moves. So you don't want it where it's going to hit people or hit cars, because it'll destroy cars, kill people, injure people. And you don't want to have a driveway where you park your car, come out, and it's down the driveway. I mean, this stuff really happens every year. And so I will now, these days, I will actually just start designing right onto this model. I'll start putting down blocks. I'm going to go through this in more detail on Friday, where I'll actually show me doing that. But I start laying out kind of like rectangular bubble diagrams, and I will actually size them. You know, I'll make a living room 24 feet by 22 feet, master suite 18 by 16 feet. The sizes that I know, these will change, but it gives me a good scope of where to place the home. I do it in a combination of ways. I'll actually start it down at the 0-0 plane, just to make sure I'm staying within the setbacks. Most of these HOAs I deal with are very strict about the setback line. You cannot, for instance, have roof lines project into them. So I have to always think about, hey, I'm probably going to have at least a 3-foot overhang, so everything needs to be in about 3 feet from that setback line. And so early on, I can already do that. And once I have really even just a basic, like, this is where the garage will be, this is the great room position, these are where the bedrooms will be, I will group them and I will make it a component, and then I'll bring it right up onto the topography. So I can immediately, even at bubble diagram, establish what my actual finished floor elevations will be. And so in that part of the phase, I'm thinking way ahead. A lot of this comes from experience talking to contractors. You know, how much space do I need in my crawl space? Is the home going to be forced air? Is it going to be hydronic, where it's less of a concern? So I got to make sure I can get all of that equipment. And, you know, these are details a lot of architects actually don't think about early on and tend to cause problems later in design, or worse, during construction when it's the most expensive. So I try to balance all of these things with the more fun aspects of design, where I start to control where what the window fenestration will be, the organization of the spaces in a little bit more detail. Am I going to have some oblique angles on the home in order for it to fit on the site based on the size of the home they want? The home that this one in particular, I believe can't remember exact, but it's somewhere around 4,500 square feet. So that's about the middle range of what I do. I do homes as small as 2,500 square feet, and I have others that are 9,000 square feet plus. Nothing Texas crazy style, 20,000 square feet. From there, once I get a basic concept sitting on the site where I know, for instance, what my offset is between the garage and the living area, because that becomes a major aspect that you have to think about. Is a client anticipating they're going to have a 3-foot differential, or is there something where they can only tolerate the 6-inch differential? And that really starts to impact construction costs for excavation, all of those things. And that's why it's really important to have a good idea of what is happening on the site. And to me, it's the most important aspect of any design project is dictated by the site. It's not just its location, but topography, views, solar, all of those things. So I have some samples of this project as it's progressed. So this is very early on. This shows a very simple schematic, and this is just past the bubble diagram. And you can see there's really not much showing here. It's looking at massing because I always develop my plans in 3D right from the beginning. Some of the things that I'm looking at here are offsets between the garage and the living area, what the second floor will contain, what that height differential is, and how it relates to the site. I don't have a sample of the this level of model into the site. I'll do that on Friday, because the models, the way I work is I get a basic concept, and then as soon as I go on to another one, this is saved, you can see as plan 1, I move on to what would be plan 2, and plan 2 starts to take a lot more shape and form. The client really wanted to have it not look like the classic mountain modern homes that we see in this development, where it's all long shed, 1 in 12, 2 in 12 pitches, but something that had some traditional roof forms. In this case, I think it's a 9 in 12 pitch we have on the gables, and then some of the other gables are 3 in 12, and then there's a couple of flat roof areas that we use to really mitigate the snow. For instance, at the entryway, this roof is not going to dump snow onto you as you're walking up the front steps, as well as any areas where we do have that potential. For instance, on this roof, I expressed to the client, we're going to have to do some either snow retention or make sure this is composition shingle to help hold the snow. And then we actually run gutters in those areas with heat tape. And we'll have a lot of that through this house. We have, any of the flat roofs, we will usually drain with scuppers to an open end. We don't enclose them with a parapet because that has proven to cause major issues in our area, especially in heavy snow years like we had in 22, 23. But even at this level, then you see this is just plan 2. So this is probably a couple weeks into the design process and reviewing with clients. I've set up all of my templates to have certain scenes saved that I know I'm always going to have, the first floor plan. I do a process of stacking viewports in layout. So this isolates certain aspects that I will render differently. For instance, this is labeled first raster because I will render that as a raster image in layout. This is first hybrid because it'll be a section cut that's rendered in hybrid form. And this is actually just the section plane cut. There is nothing above or below it. If you look through here, it's just that section cut. And it's dynamic, which is nice. Anytime I move that section cut or change anything with the plan, all the line work will change with it. So it's very simple. And so I'll have that specifically for the walls. And this is really identifies the structure in a very bold line in layout. I do the same for detail. I don't know why that's not coming up. Oh, it's not coming up because at this phase there is no detail. The only detail was I threw in a fireplace, and this is an actual fireplace component of I don't know which one it is. I think it's a Town and Country 54 or something. Then I have one for just door swings. There's no door models in this, so it's blank. I'll show you as we get further down. And then there's the second floor, the second hybrid, so it follows those same exact layouts. Then there's, of course, the roof plan and elevations. And at this stage, I try to keep everything in the white, so we're really focused not on materials, but focused on the actual design and layout of the home. In my mind, I already thinking about the materials, but I don't want my client to focus on that yet. I want them to focus on these big picture items that we're looking for. As it develops, I take that further and start to add materials. This is plan 3. And a lot of times there'll be little revisions going on with each one of these plan changes. It doesn't, I lucked out on this one and kind of hit the form really early on. So you'll even see in the construction, a lot of it looks very similar to what you see now. But in this, we did start to look at all of the materials because I do have to show this for the HOA. These HOAs have very strict submittal processes. We have to go through a pre-design meeting with them on site. Then we do a conceptual review, a preliminary review, and a final review. And so this is prepping for the preliminary review. And again, it's still in that exact same template, so everything follows. Again, there's still nothing is detailed yet, so all the windows and doors are just openings with a plane of glass. This is, of course, to keep it simple during design. That way we can go through changes very fast. It's very easy. And changes in SketchUp are very simple as long as your model is organized. You'll see everything in here is set up in groups and components. They're all set up with, I have a lot of nested groups so that I can turn off the entire second floor with one click, or the first floor, or all of the roof. I can go through and hit all of the doors, and the key is to keep it the same all the way through. And so I've set up templates that are already preset with a proxy model, so I can just instantly open up my drawings and load up a plan and get all of the drawings I need. So it's preparing the drawings is the shortest amount of time I deal with. It's mainly I spend my time in design. As the model moves down the road here at version 4, we're still doing some refinements. There's more work going on the inside. We were talking about how to break up this massive room that has these large open trusses that we were looking at for this space. But the room is really deep. I think it's almost 40 feet deep. So we had 2 uses. And one of the concept was to use just an 8-foot wall, kind of a U-shaped wall that we would fill with cabinetry and have wine fridge and a sink and, like a bar area. And that would be the TV side that opens up to a fire pit in the front. And then the back would be the living area with the grand fireplace, again, with sliders that open up to the back patio with yet another fire pit. Because this house had a unique situation where it has views on both sides. So originally the concept was, can we get a house where you see that from both ends? And then as it moves further down the line, it gets into, again, more refinements. And they're little ones. Like some of them you can see there's, starting to put some massing on the post bases. We did some revisions on materials, some revisions on openings. They added a sauna that they have, which now they've deleted. And of course, now we have this big alcove we made for the sauna, which we got to find another use for. Outdoor kitchen was added, a spa area for their hot springs spa. And that always brings in a lot of issues too. They want screening for the spas, so we recess them into a pit, which we have to drain, and then provide access to the front panel. So that's why you see this. I had to explain to the client, we have to have a removable, and a lot of times we'll do it out of redwood or something, deck incorporated into the stone patio so they can lift that up and service the spa. Little things that it's great to think about early on. You also see a lot more detail on some of the framing we were looking at. We were looking at doing exposed timber framing on the flat roofs of the home. And then we were going to be using all engineered framing for the roof, which we have to do for our snow loads. So most of our roofs generally are 11 7/8 LVLs, or sometimes they go up to 14s or usually 14s, and sometimes we have to go to 60s. We do all engineered floors to 11 and 7/8 TJIs with 1 1/8 inch plywood, so the homes feel really solid on the floor. We also have to prep, and we've been using mainly Avantech plywood so it can handle getting wet, because inevitably these frames get soaked in the wintertime.
You know how in SketchUp there's always that one plugin that takes your design further and faster, the one that saves the day? That's Knack. They're the extension for your design team. When you have a vision that doesn't exist yet, or you're dreaming up the perfect furniture piece that no one makes, Knack steps in. They design and build the custom elements, fixtures, and architectural details that make your design complete. Whether you model it or just have an idea, they can design it, model it, and build it. Knack isn't just a vendor, they're a partner. They help you deliver the exact design your client expects without compromise. To speak to someone at Knack about your project, check the link in the description.
Then the project develops into design development. This is when I actually go into a lot of detail on the home. And so I add all of my window and door components, exterior trim. This is in preparation for the final design review with the HOA, as well as for the construction documents. In this case, there's a lot of detail going into how those windows are developed. So it has all of the trim done to scale, as well as showing window frames with sashes. We mainly use metal-clad wood windows, so the outside is a metal, and then the interior is shown as a wood window and wood frame, and you can see the full sash. And it's not done exact to a manufacturer, but it's done with enough detail that it renders really well, but is not overkill. So the goal is always to keep the models as light as you possibly can. The lighter the model, the faster it is. The file, by the time it's done, I forget what the house size, but it's probably 40 to 70 megs. And then with the sites, usually under 100 megs. And that seems to work well, even on this old laptop. This is a 9-year-old laptop I'm using this on. In this stage, I'm also adding, along with the trim, I'm giving the stone, for instance, its actual thickness. When I model the house to keep things fast and give the information that I want to relate to the contractor, it's modeled just to the stud thickness. So this is actually, even though it's showing wood siding, I'm not putting a thickness to the siding. I'm just giving an imagery for it, but that wall is done just to the 5.5 inch. And so all the dimensioning works out great, because I just have to click through the dimensions. I don't have to worry about accidentally picking the wrong layer. And really, there's no need to model something that is just being added on to the frame, because once the frame is there, then they add on to it. Obviously, you have to be cognizant of things like clearances. If you want a closet to be 2 feet clear, make sure you're modeling it 2'1". And then the trim and the stone I do model because, again, for rendering purposes, that's what really gives it its, feeling of reality as we render the project. But all the way through, as I'm developing this model, since it's a component, each time I'm going back to, and I'll just open the site one, I'm updating that component. So I eventually replace that component with my main model, and it just constantly updates. And you'll notice in the house model, which is a separate model, and again, this is done for, and it doesn't matter which one I open actually. This is done for simplicity. It keeps the model small, easy to edit when it doesn't have all that site information. So I only edit this model. That's the only one. I use multiple models to produce all the drawings, but only editing in SketchUp happens here. In the site model, the only editing that happens is for site-specific work, grading, tree removal, any of that. All the patios, everything is or driveway is another one in the site. All the patios, everything that's related to the home that is going to appear in the floor plans is inside this model. The one aspect I do include, you can see here, it's highlighted, that I always keep with the model. That is actually the setback line because of its importance in not breaching that. And so I always make sure that that home is working with that. The other advantage to that is if I keep that line or setback line in there, if for some reason halfway through design, the client says, hey, I want to slightly rotate the house to capture this or that view, I can do that by rotating not the house, but the setback line. And then when I re-import it, I have something that I can, in the site model, easily reference and rotate it back into position. So it's a very simple process, and it's good to always have that. It's obviously gets shut off in all the scenes, so you don't see it printed in the floor plans. But eventually it gets to the final stage, and this is the final model. And at this stage, this is ready for construction documents. And it has a lot more detail in it. You can see all the light fixtures are in place. It has all of that information on the outside where we went with timber framing. It has things like, we have this light pedestal at the steps, handrails, things that are all required by code. It has a lot of information on the inside. So on the inside, got to use my 3D mouse more. It has all of the cabinets. You can see all the baseboard is run. Cased openings are in. All the trusses are shown. The light fixtures are shown. Every cabinet is detailed. If you saw the last presentation, they're smartly keeping all of these as, double click into them. These are all individual groups. So all the cabinets are on one group. My computer's thinking. Or it's not thinking, that's the problem. And then these are all actually individual cabinets. Countertops. And keeping it organized like that is key for not only speed, but for editing. And so it makes a big difference. But it's nice at this stage because I can really tour with the client. We go through a lot of detail on the appliances they select, as well as, what are those needs in rooms like this is a little mini butler's pantry because they wanted a double oven microwave, but they didn't want it in the kitchen area. So it has this little butler's pantry that's got a pocket door here and that pocket door there. And that leads, of course, off to the garage. And back in here is as I keep going through, their mud room. So they've got a built-in bench. We're using this reclaimed wood in a couple of accent walls. And then they got their lockers here for, coat and boot storage below. We usually put in outlets underneath each one of those for boot heaters and things like that. They have a dog also. So we wanted to have direct access to the outside and a little dog shower. These are the things I deal with. And then out in the back, we have to be really cautious of all of our mechanical equipment. We have to put them under cover, otherwise the snow will completely destroy it. Same goes for generators. We can't have snow dumping onto them because they just get ruined. So while these become generators, everybody's like, oh, it's only $5,000 for the generator. I go, yeah, and $5,000 to install and $75,000 for the cover. And yeah, so it becomes pretty elaborate. Like this one, in this case, we had to build out a retaining wall because grade's up high at this location. And so and we have to put this fencing along here. They wanted it also to contain the dog. I explained to them it's not high enough, but they said it'll be fine. But the development requires us to screen all the equipment so you can't see it. So all of these walls have to match the height. And this was classic when we spec'd the original condensers. They were 48 inches tall, and then the new model was purchased on site, and it's 54 inches tall. So our walls, we haven't heard from the HOA yet if they're going to require the fix will be to put some railing there that this house doesn't have any second floor railing, so we can't match it, but it'd be like a steel tube rail or something to give it a little screening. But you can see even in bathrooms, all of this level of detail is done in a way that is still efficient, but conveys all the information I need, not just to the client, but to the contractor. If they hire an interior designer, it helps them as well to get a good start on anything that they may want to change. I always recommend to a client, please, if you're going to hire an interior designer, let's get them involved now, right in the beginning, as opposed to later, because there's certain things. Sometimes I'll get an interior designer that goes, oh, we got to change this window. I'm like, you can't do that. That's a shear wall. So that's the window you get. And sometimes that doesn't go over well. But at this point, you can see, I'll run through quickly on the plans. What happens is, here I was asked to capture all the hidden elevations by the HOA. So I had to cut a few section cuts to capture like these elevations. Those are how I do the section cuts, but I'll jump to the, some of these I'm picking up also details that will appear on my detail sheets, like a typical outlooker. And this will just look at the model, and then in the detail, I'll do a little viewport that captures that portion of it, so I can give dimensions on this outlooker here and explain what it is, that it's extending out 12 inches. It's got a 1-inch metal cap to protect the top of the wood from drain. We do all different types of details for this. Sometimes we carry them right to the inside of the fascia board so you don't see it. That's the most economical. If they want to really express the structure, there's different ways we'll do the detailing on the ends. There's countless ways you can do it. It'll also capture some other details that I like to give a little more information on. For instance, like this is the stair bottom railing on the inside, so I can talk about what the newel post is and what the top rail is, give the code required information for the plan checker so they can see that I've got all the requirements for the spacing on the railings, termination of the handrail. But then it also jumped to the other plans. I went a little too far there. Hold on. So we go back here. These are, again, this is the exact same template that I've used for all the phases. So once I've set up my drawings, the base drawings in layout in the earliest phase of schematic design, I don't have to change it again. All I'm doing is adding more detail, which keeps it very efficient. And then again, this is just the wall section cuts. Now you'll see detail. So now this is picking up anything cut through where it hits a cabinet, or it'll hit trim, things that are a little less important for the contractor when they're framing the home. And then those are rendered in a much lighter color. You see a light gray. And then the door swings, I do a vector render on those, so it's a separate layer. And then it does it for each of the floors. So this will be the second, which is just cutting through that second floor. It ends up cutting a little bit through that great room. Makes for a really nice drawing when it's finished. I'll show that as well. Again, all those same elements shown for the second floor. Roof plan. The elevations. And when you have an oblique angle, you end up with a lot more elevations. You can see, in this case, I believe you'd think it's 8, but usually one of them is hidden, so you end up with like 7. And so this goes all the way around. And as I mentioned, since I'm setting up those drawings kind of for success early on, all I'm doing is updating the reference each time and adding more detail. As we get into the construction documents, starts adding detail, like the grid lines. And I'm not sure which layout file I have open. I think
The speakers at the SketchUp 3D Summit aren't just authors, YouTubers, or extension developers. Most are practicing professionals. They bring real-world experience from architecture, interiors, and construction, the kind of insight you only get from solving problems on real projects.
Every presenter, is basically an independent practice. They're all owners.
Others come from the tech and workflow side, the people creating tools and methods that make design faster, cleaner, and more creative.
I think if you want to meet new people, perhaps take a peek into the possible future, likely future, and meet some of the brightest minds in the SketchUp world, you should come to 3D Summit.
Together, they bridge the gap between design and execution, sharing proven workflows and lessons learned the hard way.
Being in a place where you can be around other curious people exploring tools and workflows, the world of new technology and AI, all in one conference, all in one place, and then having a good time together afterwards is really special.
The 3D Summit is where practical experience meets innovation, a rare chance to learn directly from the people pushing SketchUp forward. Don't miss your chance to be a part of it. Details are in the description.
I do have floor plans. Kind of jump to the key plan. So a lot of these homes don't all fit on a 24 by 36 inch sheet. Some might fit on a 30 by 42, but over the last 30 years, the only feedback I get from contractors is please do them on 24 by 36. 30 by 42 doesn't fit on the tailgate. And so I've always stuck with 24 by 36 inch sheets, but you then have to come up with a method for breaking those sheets up into multiple plans. At 1/8 inch, I give them a key plan so they can see the entire project, and then it breaks it into components. And this one, I managed the way the house situated, it broke into two. I've had it where a house that it had to be broken into 4 separate sheets. That creates a big drawing set. That drawing set in the end with structural, mechanical, and civil was over 130 sheets. But at this stage, this is the construction documents where it has all of the information. You can see the effect of stacking those viewports. You still get the beauty of the raster image that still shows shade, shadow, and fog. And the fog's a great tool for identifying depth, especially as stairs, if you have a large stairwell. It gives a really nice effect to it. And then you overlay those other hybrid renders on top of it that really give that bold line. And so the plans have a really nice feel to them. They're easy for everyone to read. You know, I do some little things in layout, like just highlight where we have appliances or things requiring electric, or that's all the red you're seeing there. And then I add all the notation that we need. And you know, obviously you got some plan check comments that we had to pick up. Usually don't get too many of them, but this one jurisdiction, they always hire out to different outside plan check companies, and they don't earn their money if they don't give you some comment. I just went through another house, which I was surprised because it was technically very difficult project to do, and we got no plan check comments, which was nice. And so for each floor, that's that section. This is the lower section here. The only difficult part is keeping track of the grid lines, because I do put grid lines for every single corner and element of the entire home. So we always go past, a lot of times go past Z up to 26, 30, you know, so that can be kind of a hassle if you accidentally put two grid lines with the same letter and they're off by 5.5 inches because one's catching one side of the stud, one's catching the other. It's happened to me before. And then, again, this is the roof plan, does the same thing, shows the entire roof plan. It's where I put the general notes, and then the roof plan picks up, you know, all of these grid lines are done on a shared layer, so they appear on those pages. I only have to do it once. And then it updates. And then you get a nice, what's nice with layout is you have so many options with the text. So here I do the text white where it's a darker background. So it has a really nice read to it. The red is identifying where we're running heat tape to keep the roof free from ice. Ice leads to leaks. Everybody know what water dams are? You're in Colorado. And here is just the last section of that. So the base model, and when I mentioned I use multiple models, you see the site model, you see the plan model. I also have models for a reflected ceiling plan. And that's basically the main model referenced into a file where I mirror the house model on itself. That way I take advantage of the light and shadow on the ceiling. I never edit that file. The only thing I do is I update it as a reference, and that's it. And it has its own series of scenes that are specific to their drawings that it produces. I also have that for building sections. So there'll be, again, a reference model, and the only thing I'm editing in that file is placing section cuts. Nothing else. There's no editing of the 3D model. That happens only in the one file. That way you don't have to worry about multiple files so much. And then they produce all of their own sets of drawings. For interior designers, or any interior designers in here, I know there's some. I keep a separate file for interior design, for interior elevations. And that again is all section cuts. And the main reason I do that is the amount of section cuts I'll put in a single project is probably in the 50 to 60 range. And if you've ever looked at a model with 50 to 60 section cuts, it's a nightmare to manage. You have to manage it through tags or something. And for me, it's just been easier to have these separate models. It's much easier to generate the drawings. I don't end up with an overbloated file. And the only thing I have to keep track of is, yes, I'm going to update the files. And so typically my process is right before I go to the building department, whether I remember I've updated them or not, I update them, then generate the drawings. And it makes them very fast. I mean, you can see even on this computer, which is, pretty old. I think it's got a 700 mobile graphics card. And even the site model on here. So this is the home on the site that's edited, is still very quick. And I've got the shadows on. And so at this stage, I mentioned the only thing I'm editing on the site is grading, and it's pretty subtle on here. But as I go up to the back, you can see it's got a slight uphill across here. And I always have to make sure that it's shedding away. So everything from the building out is sloping at that 5% for 10 feet. Less if I'm too close to the setback line, as well as the swales. So the swales back here are all maintained. Where you get steeper than 5% for 10 feet is you also then have to maintain a 2% pitch on the swale all the way to its endpoint. And so that's all taken care of all the way across the back. I think the break line is here where it comes out to the back side of the house and then around here to the front. Here you can see that area that's retaining off the front or off the back for that generator area. And this house, they were lucky. The driveway is really not very steep. I think we've got, for the most part, it's 2% everywhere, even down through here. I think we have just a 2% cross slope, and then this slope's at 3-to-1. It's hard to see in here if I adjust the shadows a little bit. Put it later in the day. There you can start to see the bend and the swale. And you see that's the edge of where I do model the site. So again, I'm using only sandbox tools on all of this to create any place where we're doing any type of drainage. Here you can get a better view of that drainage in the back. Now you can really see it. And then the site plan, each model generates its own particular types of drawings. The site plan creates, in this case, what the development requires this drawing, which is a site section that just cuts through the site from the street to the backyard. It's really interesting on other projects. The one I presented last year is on a really steep hill. If I have time, I'll show a couple pictures of that because it's much further along than what I presented last year. But it's very steep. And again, even sections are done the same way as the plan. So this shows just the structure cut, just the detail cut. And then this is the site plan that's generated. This is because I do different site plans to tell different information. The site plan with the roof on I use for the construction management plan. With the roof off is used for things like the landscape plan, any grading, or best management practices, things like that. And so that is really the key, is organization of your model to keep it efficient. Watching your level of detail is probably the most important thing. Think about how the home is going to be built. When the contractor goes out there, they don't care about anything except the edges of the foundation, where the edge of the stud is, the height of the stud. They don't care about the drywall. They don't care about the thickness of the siding. They don't care what trim you're using at that point. And everything, once they have that frame in place, the rest of it just comes along. It gets applied to it. As the architect, you just need to be aware of anything, like I said, that has special clearance requirements. A lot of times that's closets or You know, in the case of the sauna, I had to look at what the sauna was and then add the drywall thickness and separate the studs enough to accommodate for that. But it's simple to do once you know, I've been doing it that way for years, so I don't ever think, oh, I want a 2-foot closet. I'm always like 2'1". You know, all my door openings are shown as, you know, the frame. So it's a 3-foot door is a 3-foot 2-inch wide opening, 8-foot 1-inch tall. I try to keep all the studs at least at one end. If it's a shed, at a standard stud height, you know, 8'1", 9'1", 10'1", 12'1", so on. Because if you make your builder happy, they like you. And they're less likely to throw you under the bus. And let's see. So moving down the line here again, this does exactly like I mentioned all of the other plans. You know, property lines. That's where I left off. Was I assign a line type to it. In this case, the dash double dot for the property line. Setback has one. I like to differentiate between the easements and setbacks. This will isolate where the utilities are. Again, the trees, contours, and again, all of these are stacked. On Friday, I'll go through the neat trick of how you get the viewports to all align with one click of the mouse, and it's done. It's very simple. A lot of people struggle with that concept and try to just align it in layout, which will kill your budget. And then early in design, before I go to a render, I still have some basic views saved because I'll present the perspectives directly out of SketchUp on the drawing sheets. Once it gets into design development, I do switch. I'm using D5 render now, and those become more solid renderings.
It's so cool to see how Nick works through a project from the ground up. If you want to see how he finishes this one, check out part 2 of his presentation right here. In this video, he walks through the full set of construction documents and shows progress photos from the build. Or you can watch our latest upload right here. Right here. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and check the links in the description to join us in Denver for the next SketchUp 3D Summit. I'll see you there.